Last time we were exploring how you can combat misinformation and disinformation in yourself and in your community. We left off on something called a recommender system. So what exactly is a recommender system and why do they matter? What impact are they having on the rapid viral spread of misinformation and disinformation in our communities? Before I get into that information, I do want to remind everyone that if you are in a hurry to access this information in the series on combating misinformation and disinformation, all of the information is available for free publicly on our Patreon at patreon.com/Sanctum of the Craft. It is available there as a downloadable PDF, as an EPUB, like an ebook, as a Google Docs link, and as a 3-hour-long recorded seminar. So if you need this information right now, you do not have to wait for these videos to come out on YouTube. You can find it there for free. Also, the rest of our Patreon content, which includes classes on herbalism for AFAB autonomy, herbalism for activism, street medicine, tarot, death magic, etc., all starts at $1 a month. So we actually try to keep things very, very inexpensive, if not free, for our community. But I digress. Let's get into it. One of the filters placed on the bubbles most people exist in online are recommender systems, also called recommender platforms, engines, or algorithms, which are information filtering systems that provide suggestions based on what the system thinks would be pertinent to a particular user. The original definition of a recommender system, as put forth by Paul Resnick and Hall H. Varian in 1997, is a system in which people provide recommendations, either explicitly or implicitly, and then they're aggregated and sent to the appropriate recipients. It was intended as a logical extension of recommendations that were provided by either mutual acquaintances or trusted experts to a space in which the vast amount of available information would need to be filtered without necessarily having a person to make a recommendation. So think for a moment about a library. When you go to the library, you can approach the librarian and ask for a recommendation. Or if you were to go to a record store, you could approach the person who works behind the counter and say, hey, I really like these records. Can you recommend me something like it? A recommender system was supposed to be a logical extension of that kind of system. Recommender systems suggest what products to purchase, what music to listen to, what movies or TV series to watch, where to eat, and or what news to read. They may even recommend who to be friends with or who to consider dating. They may operate on a single axis, like music, or multiple axes. They may access one stream of input, again, like the music a person plays, or they may operate across multiple platforms and take inputs from all of them. Recommender systems make use of either or both collaborative filtering and content-based filtering. Collaborative filtering builds the filter model from a user's past behavior as well as similar behavior by other users. Content-based filtering uses a series of pre-tagged characteristics in order to recommend similar things to the users. Note that almost all modern recommender systems incorporate both types, as well as applying advanced techniques that are not necessarily based on the user or the content, but instead on aggregated data that is derived from a large dataset of user and content interactions. Last.fm provides an example of a primarily collaborative filtering technique. It would create a station based on observing the tracks and artists that the user had enjoyed, and either explicitly rated highly or listened to often, and looking for other users who have enjoyed the same material. It will then find additional music that those users have enjoyed and add it to the station of the person that they think would probably enjoy it. Pandora was originally designed to utilize a content filtering technique. The Music Genome Project identified approximately 400 attributes that a piece of music could have. When it creates a station, Pandora then finds pieces of music that match along many of the same attributes with the seed music that was used. User input, liking or disliking songs, helped refine the station, with an algorithm determining which attributes the user considered most important to match and providing more music that did so. Now, it may have adopted a hybrid model, although it is a closed source, so that's difficult to say for certain. Collaborative models require a large amount of information about a user to make accurate recommendations. In the modern literature, this may be described as sparsity, and that insufficient collaborative users or data from those users limits the usefulness of these models. Content-based models require less information to start, but are more limited in scope. Additionally, the computational complexity grows pretty rapidly. Netflix uses a hybrid recommender system by both comparing the watching habits of similar users and offering movies that share characteristics with films that a user has rated highly. In truth, mostly all modern recommender systems use advanced computational capabilities and complex theoretical models to try to analyze ever-expanding data sets, where the primary purpose has shifted dramatically from what was initially envisioned. When first described, recommender systems were conceived as a device that would present a filtered subset of data to a user that would match up with the desires of the user. Modern systems instead present a filtered subset of data to the user that matches up with the desires of the owner of the recommender system, while being sufficiently useful to the user that they will not just seek out an alternative. As these recommender systems grow and become more complex, they require larger and more complex data sets in order to predict user behavior with more and more accuracy and detail. This includes a tremendous amount of data that is then analyzed to perform what would have been referred to as implicit recommendations. Originally, this included things like how many minutes somebody spent reading an article that they had been presented with. Now, this includes things such as extended browsing history over a long period and how a user's eyes move relative to the screen. As an example, so-called AI recommender systems use machine learning to analyze complex data sets, including user behavior, preferences, and interactions, to try to detect patterns that might be overlooked by more traditional methods. Machine learning recommendation models may take into account more data than other models, such as mouse movement and eye movement. Short-form content curated by AI recommender systems may be more addictive than social media content in general, which is already pretty addictive. Without getting into the mathematical techniques involved, ranging from large language models, better known as LLMs, incorrectly referred to as AI, to the sequential model for context-aware point-of-interest recommendations, the primary goal is to better predict what to present to the user in order to get the user to achieve the desired results. These models are generally what is referred to as context-aware, meaning that they incorporate information external to anything the user has done online. This can incorporate geolocation data, time of day, the user's social activity, including things a person has talked about in the presence of their phone, phones that have been in proximity to each other, and the data set of the people who those phones belong to, and the aggregate data of an entire collection of users in a family or group of friends. A 2024 review of the state of referral systems acknowledged that the extensive data collection necessary for personalized recommendations raises significant privacy issues, particularly concerning user content and data security. However, the black box nature of these recommender systems makes it really difficult to know exactly what data is being collected and what's being done with it. The key point to note is this: the recommendations being offered are being done so primarily by corporate entities in a capitalist system. Therefore, what is in the interest of those organizations, and therefore what drives what recommendations are presented to the end user, is whatever will make the most money for that corporate entity. This is distinctly different from what is in the best interest or even of the greatest use to the end user, as long as the end user is not sufficiently alienated to stop using the recommendation service altogether. As an example, Amazon reported a decade ago that 35% of its revenue came from its proprietary recommender system, while Netflix recently attributed revenues of approximately $33.7 billion to its recommender system, along with a significant portion of their ability to retain customers. What is shown by any given recommender system is based on the profit of the system owner, and nearly every interaction on the internet today involves explicit or implicit use of a recommender system. Even academic journal articles are filtered through recommendation models on Google Scholar and PubMed, which prioritize papers and articles published by people who've published before and who are cited by many others. The primary concern that we have in relation to this class and studying misinformation and disinformation and how they spread online is how recommendation systems act as filters on information. The social media platform previously called Twitter admitted that its recommender system amplified biased content. But all of the social media platforms, search engines, etc., rely on engagement to drive profit. The more users engage, the more advertisements they see, the more money the corporation makes. At a presentation in 2016, the data scientist and machine learning expert Monica Lee, who worked for Facebook at the time, mentioned that internal research had determined that 64% of all extremist group joins were due to their own recommendation tools, including the groups you should join and discover algorithms. In 2018, the Wall Street Journal reported that a slide from an internal Facebook presentation claimed that our algorithms exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. Then in 2018, Mark Zuckerberg himself published the following graphic in a public post. He said that engagement with content on Facebook dramatically increases as it approaches the policy line of what's allowed, and that Facebook's research suggests that no matter where we draw the lines on what is allowed, a piece of content gets closer to that line, people will engage with it more on average, even when they tell us afterwards that they don't like the content. In 2021, whistleblower Frances Haugen released thousands of internal Facebook documents called the Facebook Files to the Wall Street Journal. He claimed the company continually chose to maximize profits over what was in the public interest. In early 2025, Meta also abandoned the use of independent fact-checkers on Facebook and Instagram, replacing them with X-style community notes, where commenting on the accuracy of posts is left to the users. YouTube was at one point hugely influential due to the effectiveness of its recommender model. They used a proprietary AI algorithm that was modified frequently and was responsible for as much of 70% of all watched content. Recommendations led people down rabbit holes that were a pipeline to extremist views. YouTube contested these claims as myths and said that extremist content did not generate more engagement than all other content. They denied their recommendation system prioritized extremist content. Approximately 62% of US adults claim that they have encountered false content on YouTube, but that doesn't necessarily imply that they were being led down rabbit holes towards extremism. So, what's a rabbit hole? I mention rabbit holes fairly frequently on our channel because I talk about falling down a research rabbit hole. That's not quite what I mean in this particular context. A rabbit hole is a specific kind of filter bubble where a recommender model encourages people to engage with more and more niche or more and more extreme content over time. When I talk about falling down a rabbit hole, I generally mean that I have fallen down a niche rabbit hole where I'm just going deeper and deeper and deeper in really hyper-specific research. What I'm referring to in this particular class where we're addressing misinformation and disinformation is when the recommender system recommends more and more extreme content over time. One study performed by M. Fadul, G. Cheslot, and H. Farid in 2020 looked at 8 million YouTube recommendations over the course of 15 months from YouTube's Watch Next algorithm, which in the sidebar recommends what video a user should watch and automatically starts one if the autoplay option is used by the viewer. The research team used an algorithm to detect and classify content as being either conspiratorial or not conspiratorial. They started their first 20 recommendations from a set of over 1,000 of the most popular informational channels on YouTube, so they were not starting from an extremist position. They found that if the first video was at all even slightly conspiratorial, the next recommendation was likely to also be conspiratorial. From October 2018 to January 2019, if a person watched the conspiratorial video, there was a 70% chance they'd be recommended another video about conspiracy theories. The closer to 2020 the study got, the less likely the recommender system was to promote conspiracy content, which is consistent with claims from YouTube that they were implementing countermeasures. Those countermeasures included deleting millions of videos and altering their algorithm. The study resulted in pressure from the US Congress on YouTube to crack down on misinformation on YouTube. YouTube announced changes in 2019 to reduce the spread of content that comes close to, but not quite across the line of violating our community guidelines. YouTube claimed that these interventions resulted in a 50% drop in watch time from recommendations for borderline content and harmful misinformation, and a 70% decline in watch time from non-subscribed recommendations. However, those claims have not been independently evaluated or verified. The study, Subscriptions and External Links Help Drive Resentful Users to Alternative and Extremist YouTube Channels, set out to study whether YouTube facilitated the consumption of harmful content. The researchers found that exposure to alternative and extremist channel videos on YouTube was concentrated amongst a small group of people with high prior levels of gender and racial resentment. The viewers follow external links from other social media sites to the channels, subscribe to them, and are then recommended more content similar to that which they have already liked. YouTube wasn't necessarily showing the extremist content to just anyone, but people who engage with extremist content on other social media platforms, but then follow links to YouTube, which would show them more of the same. Their findings suggest that YouTube's algorithms were no longer sending people down rabbit holes, possibly due to the changes the company made in its recommender system in 2019. However, it still hosts and recommends extremist content to people who are already extremists. Its recommendation algorithm was playing a secondary role in facilitating exposure to harmful extremist content. However, the recommendations of those videos to people who don't already have extremist views was now more limited than it was previously. In the case of YouTube, it was likely there was once a major issue with the platform's recommender system funneling people down the alt-right rabbit hole. However, now it seems that the recommender system of other platforms drives people to YouTube, where they fall into echo chambers. A systematic review conducted in 2020 assessed the conclusions of 23 studies and found that at least 14 of those studies, so 61%, found that YouTube's recommender system was funneling people towards more problematic content. The studies they reviewed were all conducted between the dates of 2013 and 2021, some of them after YouTube had fixed its recommender system. It may no longer be recommending conspiracy theories to everyone who comes onto its platform, but if a person starts watching that kind of content, it will still maximize engagement by recommending similar videos. A study published in April of 2024 by the Dublin City University Anti-Bullying Centre found that recommender algorithms used by social media platforms are rapidly amplifying misogynistic and male supremacist content, specifically to young boys and teenagers. The study was conducted by 3 scientists who created 10 fake or sock puppet accounts on 10 blank smartphones, 5 on YouTube Shorts and 5 on TikTok. The sock puppet accounts were for 16 to 18-year-old young men. Each account was immediately fed extremist content within 23 minutes of being created. The content was male supremacist, anti-feminist, and anti-equality. If the account showed any interest by watching any of the videos, the amount recommended rapidly increased. By the last round of the experiment, more than 400 videos had been watched by each account, and the vast majority of the content was extremist. 76% of all the videos TikTok recommended were extremist, and 78% of the YouTube Shorts were extremist. In addition to the extremist content were videos centered on male motivation, making money, and male mental health, which may help the recommender system tap into the financial and emotional insecurities of the young men that it targets. Beyond the male supremacist content, it also recommended reactionary alt-right and conspiracy theory content, including a lot of anti-transgender content. This amounted to 13.6% of the recommended content on TikTok and 5.2% of the recommended content on YouTube. Certain influencers from the manosphere also featured heavily in the recommended content. The dangerous influencer most recommended was Andrew Tate, who was recommended 582 times on YouTube Shorts accounts and 93 times on TikTok accounts. Conducting further research on recommender filters and filter bubbles on social media platforms and search engines is made more difficult in that most of the models are proprietary. They are constantly evolving and changing the models in search of ever more effective ones. Next time, we're going to get into how filter bubbles, recommender systems, and group polarization all work together, and in particular, how they're being used together to feed group polarization, and how over time this has undermined our democracy. So here's my question for all of you. Have you ever been recommended extremist content online and been like, whoa, what the heck is this? And if you watched it in sort of your shocked state, were you recommended more of the same? Okay. As always, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment, possibly by answering the question that I just asked you. And if you feel our content would benefit people you know, please share it with them. Okay, be safe out there, everyone.